All right, Rachell, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I appreciate you coming out and welcome to the Send Me podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm excited to hear your story. I know you have an amazing story just from hearing a little bit about it. And I'm excited to hear the entire thing for the first time, just like I know a lot of the viewers are. So basically, I just want to kind of start with, like I always do, what was home life like? How did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
So for me, growing up, I had really young parents. They were both 15 years old. I grew up in Hayward, South Hayward, majority of my life. And so having really young parents was like growing up with siblings,
Yeah.
not really parents. And so both of my parents were addicts and, living the lifestyle of gangs. And my dad was always in and out of prison. And so my mom, it was mostly me and my mom growing up. But majority of the time when my dad was in prison, we would move around. I spent a little bit of time in Sacramento, I think like first and second grade. And then after my dad paroled about 6 years later, we spent a little time in Stockton.
Okay.
And so, starting off really young, my parents, they did every drug under the sun.
Got it.
late 80s, when I was little, about 3 years old, my mom and dad got into crack and all different kinds of stuff was, going around then. And so that was their drug of choice at that time.
Okay.
And we lived in some projects in Hayward, and there was a lot of kids. We would just all pretty much run around and play while our parents were in the houses getting high,
Yeah.
whatever. And so I had a neighbor that I used to go play with next door. And he was a little boy about my age. And sometimes his older cousin would come over on the weekends. He was about, I would say 12 years old,
Okay.
12, maybe 13. And so I was 3 years old, and I remember I went over there to go play. And his parents were addicts as well. So, everybody kind of like mingled around the apartments, but we were upstairs playing. And me and my friend were just usually, doing our normal playing with toys and stuff. And his older cousin basically laid us down and took off our pants and proceeded to rape us both.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, being that young and, being sexually abused that young, it kind of just like opened my mind. Like, I feel like I never really got to be a child from that point on.
Yeah.
Like, it was kind of always survival mode, and just really trying to process what had happened, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember, having this shame and guilt around what had happened to me, knowing that it was wrong, but not knowing, like, being so little, like I was literally still a baby,
Yeah. 3 years
holding
old.
on
Wow.
to that. Yeah, holding on to that was really heavy baggage at a really, really young age.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I held on to that for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so shortly after that, my dad caught a case. He got sentenced to 6 years in prison.
Okay.
And, even being a product of that environment, and, my parents were really young. So, my dad was about 19 at that time, my mom too. So they weren't even 21 yet, and so all this
So
stuff
they-
is happening.
So they had you when they were about 16?
Yeah,
Okay.
15 years
Got it.
old,
Okay.
16 around my mom was when she had me. And so, being exposed to all those types of things, I remember literally being in the courtroom through my dad's whole trial with my mom.
Okay.
And watching all these different people, take the stand on my dad, and, watching, everything,
It's
listening to
amazing
everything.
that you still have these memories
I
from that
do.
long ago. That's
I really
impressive.
do. And
Yeah.
and it's I know it's a trip too, because I can remember things being even a baby, I don't know if it's like from the trauma. Like I've read some stuff that like when you have trauma really young, like your mind is, works a little bit differently, or it exposes other memories. So
Yeah.
I can remember that, and it's like holding on to all that kind of stuff and like being exposed to that lifestyle so young was kind of like normal, like this is the norm.
Yeah.
And so, as we, progressed in life and we followed my dad around, like I mentioned, we moved to Sacramento. He did some time in Folsom. So we moved to Sacramento to be a little bit closer to him. And that was a whole nother experience for me.
Yeah.
Like literally kindergarten, first grade, I'm riding my bike. My mom would let me ride my bike, and we lived in Oak Park. And that's like a major,
Yeah.
one of the major ghettos of Sacramento. And I remember the first time riding my bike to the corner store to Oak Park Market, and was in the middle of a shooting. Like watched
Oh,
a
wow.
man get
And
sprayed
how old are
down.
you again at this
I
time?
was like 5.
5. Wow.
5
Well,
years
you know
old.
what? I do want to rewind you real quick. I know you said my dad caught a case. What was that case involving? What happened?
So I don't remember exactly, but he was involved in like some kind of like home invasion type thing or
Got it.
something like
Okay.
that. And so even though that's why they gave him so much time, because back then, like even though it was like one of his first prison terms he ever caught, it was like taken really seriously.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so that was like his MO.
Okay.
Like back then,
Okay.
that was what he was into. And so yeah, that experience was hard for me and my mom,
Oh yeah.
especially my mom being
Absolutely.
so young. But even switching back to being in Oak Park was like such a whole different experience,
Yeah.
because that's when I was exposed to drive-bys, to all different types of gang violence. And I remember being in front of the liquor store and watching a man getting sprayed down, like I said, and
Yeah.
there's blood everywhere, and there's a dead body in front of you, and you're 5 years old, and you're like, oh wow.
Yeah.
So
So are you kind of numb to this kind of stuff, or are you
totally
just like,
numb.
or are you freaking out?
No,
No, it was
totally numb.
Wow.
Like totally numb. And to remind you, like I'm still harboring all of the stuff that had happened to me. Like I
Yeah.
didn't. I'm just gonna walk you right like into when I told my parents what had happened to me, and so after that, like it was just a bunch of here and there and moving and stuff like that until my dad got home.
Yeah.
And then once my dad got home, it was like, everything started all over again. Like my dad used to abuse my mom. They'd get loaded, and then my dad would just like beat my mom for no reason, and they started using drugs heavily again. We lived in Stockton. I was about 9 when my dad came home. I was 8 or 9. And so, just having that experience all over again, I was experiencing like extreme depression and anxiety. And at that time, something happened, and I had started having memories of what had happened to me. I think I kind of blocked it out for
Yeah.
for all those years. And so I started having dreams, and I would have these dreams of these two men, grown men, like chasing me, and I'm a little kid, and it would be like pitch black dark, and they're like chasing me, and I could just remember like the fear that I had about these men chasing me, and I would wake up every night like sweating and like freaking out. And I was like, what is going on? And then I would remember. I would have memories of being raped. And in my
Man.
mind, I was so scared, because at that time my mom and dad started using again. They
Yeah.
would be up tweaking all night, like
And this is when you're still a toddler, basically, right?
right,
You're,
right.
yeah,
And
wow.
so in my mind by then, I'm like second, third grade, and I'm thinking like, did this really happen to me? Like I was trying to convince myself if this was true or not.
Oh man.
And so, like, let me tell you, I was like to the point, like I had dark circles under my eyes because I would be up all night. Mind you, I'm only like 9, right?
Yeah.
And so it was stressing me out. I can remember back in those days, it was, I would watch MTV and it was their like first season of The Real World. And that was like my show because I'd be up all night, like
Yeah.
stressed out, and I
Yeah.
would make myself sick. Like I would throw up at school. I would throw up at home. Like it was taking me over physically. And it was really, really hard because like I was my parents' only child, right? So they would get high and they would like tweak off me. That was like my mom's thing. She would always be like, if anybody's doing anything to you, you let me know. And like she pumped so much fear into me that I was like questioning myself. Like if I expose this to them and it's not true, like what's going to happen? Like I was so
Yeah.
scared. And so I remember one day my mom and dad were like on a good one, and my dad was in the garage and my mom was in her room doing whatever. And I couldn't hold it in anymore. Like I couldn't take it.
Yeah.
And so I remember my mom saying something and she was like, what's wrong with you? Like, moms always
Yeah,
know.
you
And she
can
was like,
tell.
something, like I'm just a little girl. And she's like, what's wrong with you? And she was like, if there's anything you need to tell me, you can tell me. And she was like, do you need to tell me anything? And I was like, yes. And I just remember the look on my mom's face was like, yes. And I was like, yes. And so, excuse me, my mom called my dad into the house from the garage, and my dad was like, what? Like my dad was like super cholo.
Yeah.
And so my dad's like, what? And, my mom's like, your daughter has to tell us something. And so I was like, I can't sleep. I can't eat. Like, this is why I'm sick. I'm like, something happened to me when I was little. And I just like gave them full blown details. Like,
Wow.
I used to go play and next door, and his cousin, laid us down, took off our pants. He had sex with us both, made us have sex with each other. And I just remember like my dad let out, like my dad was like machismo, right? Like I
Mm.
never seen any weak side of my dad, and my dad let out like this cry that I will never forget. Like, and I was like, that fear came in. I was like, oh shit, here it is, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is what I was afraid of. And so I just remember my dad dropped to his knees. I was sitting on the edge of the couch, and my dad literally dropped to his knees, and he was just at my feet, and he cried so hard. And my mom, I just remember my mom like wigging out, and I'm like, okay, it's happening. But at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
being 8, 9 years old, the weight that was lifted off of me was like, oh, it felt like a ton of bricks just had been released. And I was
Yeah.
like, you know, at that time, like, you don't really know, like, I knew about God, but, but for something in my spirit was like, thank you, like, I
Yeah.
didn't know who I was thanking, but, at that time, but letting that go was such a relief.
Oh, I
And
can imagine. I mean,
getting into that time of our life is like,
this is almost 5, 6 years holding on to it, right?
whole
Yeah.
6 years.
Wow.
Yeah, 6 whole years. And so, things started getting really rocky for my parents at that time. Things weren't working out for us in Stockton. And my grandparents own a roofing company. They've been doing roofing like our whole lives. And so my dad, it was a really big commute for my dad every morning. So that was kind of like our reason to move back to Hayward. And so around 10 years old, we moved back to Hayward. And that was like the first time having the feelings, everything was out in the open, and like having to deal with it and process it. I think I was about 10 years old. We moved back to Hayward. We lived on Sunset in North Hayward. And so we had this really nice house. And I think that was the first time that I had really been exposed to drugs. And I started smoking weed.
Okay.
I was experimenting with weed.
Now,
experim-
I do want to rewind you again, real quick. I know you said your dad was a cholo. So what is your background?
So my background, my dad has been involved in gangs my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And so my dad was a northerner.
Northerner. Okay.
Yeah.
Is he Mexican?
No, my
No.
dad's Spanish.
He's Spanish.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Mom?
I'm Spanish and my mom's Puerto Rican.
Puerto Rican. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that Chicano lifestyle was our culture,
Got it.
like all
Okay.
the way through and through. It still is.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just part of it's our culture and my family. And so when we came back, things got really rough between my parents, and a lot of abuse again. Like my dad was like beating the shit out of my mom, like literally every day.
Wow.
And to the point where it
In
was
front
like
of you guys?
in front of me, yeah,
Wow.
all the time.
Any
Like,
brothers and sisters? I don't remember if you
so
said that.
I do have a younger sister,
Okay.
but she didn't come until I was 13.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
we're 13 years apart.
So you're seeing all this
Yeah.
alone.
So I'm my mom
Yeah.
and dad's only child. My sister has a different dad.
Okay.
Yeah. So all of this alone,
Got it.
completely alone.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically, things got really rough. My Nina, my auntie, my mom's sister, lived around the corner from us, and so I used to spend a lot of time over there. I was really close with my cousin. He was like more like my brother, and so I used to spend a lot of time over there because my Nina would want me to come, so I didn't have to watch my mom and dad fight. And so I remember it just got really bad, like bad, bloody, like terrible. Like everything in the house would be broken. Like they're swinging on each other with bats. And I just remember one of the last times like I really seen my dad like beat my mom. And I remember I was screaming and like, stop, 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 stop. I was 10 years old and like nothing was stopping him,
Yeah.
And it just came to the point where I was like, I didn't know what to do. Like I was scared to death. Like I know my dad wouldn't hit me. My dad never hit me, but just to have to witness that all the time, like no matter what happened or if it was a good day or a bad day, like it always happened.
Yeah.
And so I remember being at my Nina's house, and I remember we were playing, it had gotten dark, and I was thinking like I'm going to ride my bike home. And I had heard sirens, right?
Okay.
And I was only 10, but like in like deep down, I could sense that something was wrong. Like I knew those sirens were for us, right?
Yeah.
And
your
so
house.
mind you, like we're the next street over.
Mm-hmm.
And so my Nina had got the call, and I went in the house. I told my Nina, I'm going to ride my bike home. And she's like, no, mija, like stay here. Right. And she was like, stay here. And I could hear more and more sirens. So my dad had beat my mom so bad that he beat her unconscious, and they had to call the ambulance. They had to take her to the hospital. I never really got too many details. My mom always like swept all that kind of stuff under the rug unless I was like literally there.
Yeah.
But I remember that was kind of like when things ended with my mom and dad. It just got really messy. My dad was still on parole.
Yeah.
And my grandma would like call his parole officer and like get him arrested, and so things just got really, really messy, and it was just like all over the place all the time. So I spent a lot of time at my Nina's house growing up too. And then so my parents kind of split up after that. And then once my parents split up, me and my mom, we stayed with my grandparents for a little while. That was around 6th grade. And I still experimented with weed. I smoked cigarettes at that time too.
Wow.
I had my
You're
mom's
10 years old?
Yeah.
Wow.
My mom's youngest sister is 5 years older than me.
Okay.
So like she was like my go-to person growing up too. And so like she was 15, I was 10, and like I would kick it with her and her friends and like drink the bottle or like dumb stuff. But that was kind of like how it all started for me. And then once we moved in with my grandparents, my dad was kind of like just on his own. At that time, my dad had got addicted to heroin.
Okay.
And they always kind of like hid that from me. But at that time, he went back to prison.
Was he shooting heroin?
And yes, he was shooting heroin.
He was shooting. Okay.
Yeah. So he went back to prison. Me and my mom lived with my grandparents for a little while. And then like some stuff had happened, and my dad got into it. Like there was a riot in the prison, and my dad had got his throat split.
Oh, wow.
And so like my dad almost died, and they hid that from me. And I remember like I was always pretty good with like sensing stuff, feeling stuff, like And I remember like I would overhear like conversations my mom would try to have on the side, like so I didn't hear, but I always heard her talking, And I remember hearing that something happened, and my mom talking to my grandma, my dad's mom, and like, the concern, and like they didn't know what was happening, and he was in the hospital and he had to have surgery and like all this other stuff. And so I remember when I finally found out, I was like so upset with my mom. Like, why would you keep that from me? Like, what if my dad died?
Yeah.
Like, what if my dad died? Like that, I was really hurt and upset.
What prison was he in?
At that time he was in Pelican Bay.
Pelican Bay. Okay. And he was still running with the Northerners at
Yeah,
the time?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, entirely my whole life. I mean, it was always like level 4 prisons.
Yeah.
All growing up, I've been to every visiting room.
Yeah.
It's funny because I would say like, oh, normal families, like they have the like pictures of you growing up in the hallway, like first grade, second grade. All mine are like Polaroids of all the different visiting rooms of all the
Wow,
prisons
yeah.
in California, like literally, right?
Yeah.
And so, when my parents split up, it was kind of a huge relief for me, like to even say that now is like, but that's how I felt. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, it's over. Cool. Like, I don't have to deal with this shit anymore. Like, it was so bad, like nobody was happy, like nothing was coming out of it, like I couldn't even remember the last time we were a happy family. Like, we had our moments, but like, it was just a lot. It was a lot to deal with, right? And then still processing my own trauma was just like, there was always still something there. I was always carrying stuff that wasn't mine, right? And
Yeah.
at such a young age.
And even after talking about your abuse that you went through, it's still there.
Yeah.
You're
Always,
still remembering
always.
it. Yeah.
It haunts me even today. Like,
Yeah, I
thinking
bet.
about coming here, like that opened up and I was like, oh, I'm going to talk about it,
Yeah.
But, I think that once my parents split up, it was kind of a relief. And, that's when I started like venturing into my own stuff and like really trying to figure out who I was, right? And so like getting into my teenage years, I smoked weed and I drank. And, at that time, my mom got heavily into selling drugs and like into her own stuff. And my mom was always affiliated her, because my dad. And so,
How did you get into smoking weed? Was that just like a friend type peer pressure type thing? Or how did that work?
it's funny that you say that because my auntie that I mentioned, they were all 15, 16, and I was 10. So I used to be like the baby of the bunch hanging
Okay.
out. And so I remember there was a couple of neighborhood kids that would sell weed.
Yeah.
And they were like, you want to try it? And I was like, yeah, heck yeah. So we would be out there smoking cigarettes and drinking. And then that's how I got introduced to weed.
Got it.
And
Okay.
so at that time, like, that wasn't my thing. But like, as soon as like 6th, 7th grade came along, like when I had formed my own group of friends and like was venturing out, I was smoking weed like every day.
Okay.
Every day. And so I always like shunned my parents for like being addicts, right?
Yeah.
And I swore like, oh, I'm never going to be like them. I'm never going to do drugs. Like, oh no, right? That was my mentality. Like all through my, as a kid, teenage years. And then like, oh, you're no different. Like, you're smoking and drinking. But no,
Yeah.
I was the shit and you guys weren't. Like, you were dope fiends.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I thought,
It's a perception that
And
you had. Yeah.
and so when it was just me and my mom, my mom never left me. Never. Like, my mom always took care of me the best that she could with what she had. I love her and I appreciate her for that. But at the same time, it was always like a double-edged sword because I was exposed to a lot because my mom never left me behind. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I seen everything. I seen the drug deals. I seen the gang violence. I seen everything, like the addictions, all the stuff. And it was like, okay, like I was always well informed of what was going on around us. Like, I had to live like that. I had to live like that.
Well, you had the playbook for it.
For it
right?
all,
Yeah.
right?
And you said
So
your mom was affiliated too, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
Northerners. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So at that time is when I started like venturing in my own stuff and like hanging out with all the gang members and you know, for us, for my generation of kids from our family, it was like, oh, you're so and so's daughter, you're so and so's daughter, right? So that
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like the thing for me. So like, growing up like that, and like my dad was well known. I mean, so was my mom, and so like growing up like that was always like, it was kind of like this hierarchy of like don't mess with her, and so that was something for me too that I took
Made you feel the
pride and ego
powerful,
in,
right?
right?
A little
So
bit.
so that didn't help. That didn't help build my situation, right? So it always made me feel like I had to live up to this expectation, right?
Yeah.
There was always these expectations that I lived by. And so when I started getting into drinking and smoking and kicking it, like I always did it at home. Like my mom allowed me to do these things at home, and she'd be like, "Oh, I don't want my kid out in the street, so it's okay." So everybody came to my house to kick it. So by the time I was like in the 6th, 7th grade, like my mom was the cool mom, because like we could smoke our weed, we could smoke our cigarettes, we could
Yeah.
drink, and like it was cool, right? And so that was kind of how it was for a little while. And then once I got into high school, my cousin that I'd mentioned, that was like my brother, he had got involved with my best friend that I grew up with. And so they were together. And so like we all hung out a lot. And then my best friend ended up getting pregnant
Mm-hmm.
from my cousin. And so during that time, we all spent a lot of time together, and me with my cousin's best friend. And then I remember one summer, my cousin went to Texas to stay with my Nino, and his best friend was just like hanging around. He would come by my house sometimes. Well, we ended up starting a relationship. And by then, I was already like smoking weed every day, like I said, and drinking. And that was just kind of like the thing that we did for a little while. And then things got really rough for my mom. She was like, selling dope, and something that happened at our house. And then somebody got murdered on our front porch.
Oh wow.
And so I remember I was hanging out with my god sister, and we were out all night, and my god sister dropped me off at home, and we lived in a mobile home park. And so I remember walking down the driveway. I would have her drop me off down the way a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I remember bending the corner, and it was just like all taped off, and it was like police everywhere. And I was like, oh my God. Like the first thing I thought was something happened to my mom. So
Uh-huh.
I'm running up to the door, because like my house is taped off, and I'm like looking, I'm like, where is my mom? Like I'm freaking out. And at this point, I'm like, this was already high school. And so I was like 15, and I see my mom, and she's in the back of a detective car.
Okay.
And the detectives are like, asking me like, who are you? And I'm like, I live here. Like, where's my mom? Like, and they're like,
Yeah.
okay. They realize like, oh, she's just a kid, right? So my mom's like, that's my daughter. That's my daughter. And so there was like a bunch of stuff happening at that time. Like I didn't know what was happening. Like, I was young, and my mom didn't want to like freak me out. And my mom was just like, call your god sister, go back with your god sister.
So was the murder directly involved with like drug dealing and
Yeah,
stuff like? Okay.
totally was. All of that. And so, you know, being part of that lifestyle and keeping it solid and not being snitches, and that's how we lived, right? And
Yeah.
so my mom had to take that, and do what she had to do. And so with that being said, she at that time met my stepdad, and by then I had my little sister. My little sister was probably just a baby by then, who my mom picked up and just kind of moved away. Like she kind of gave me the ultimatum, like, hey, if you want to come with us, you can. She was like, but we're moving. And by then I was like, had my boyfriend, and I was like, nah, like I was trying to finish school because I was missing a lot of school. I'd stay home with my little sister. And like I said, I was just kicking it all the time and trying to figure out who I was, getting in my own little crowds.
Yeah. Did you go
And
to
then
school in the Hayward area?
I did,
High
yeah.
school too?
Yeah, I went to
Yeah.
tennis in high
Oh,
school.
okay.
Yeah. So by then, I went to Cesar Chavez. It was La Vista still,
Yeah.
seventh grade year, eighth grade, they switched it to Cesar Chavez. And so once my mom had to like pick up and move away, everything changed. Like everything changed for me. And I remember like at that time, here and there, I had been introduced to Coke. Like I
Okay.
snorted Coke, and it wasn't really my thing, like at all. Like I didn't really like it. And I remember like my mom during that time, like I mentioned, was selling drugs, and
Yeah.
so like I would steal like part of her.
I,
It was crank back then.
yeah, I do want to touch because I want to hear about all of the, what got you into the drug scene and everything. But I do want to touch on something you mentioned, sort of that playbook that I was talking about. When mom was dealing with the gangs and doing the drug scene and all that stuff, what's a specific memory that you have from that you've seen, like something, a violent action or something that happened at that time that you can remember that sticks with you?
There's so many.
There's so many.
There's so many.
Yeah.
I remember, like I was always my mom's right hand person, and if somebody owed her money, or like I said, my mom took me everywhere with her.
Okay.
And so like speaking to a time somebody owed her money, and I remember we went, and like it was just a group of girls,
Yeah.
and we all went and like kicked these fools' doors in, and like had them all hogtied, and was like, hey, like,
Wow.
you owe my mom money,
Yeah.
like went in there, took everything of theirs, made sure that they paid the money, and just it was a trip because
So you weren't just along for the ride; you were actually helping out at
Yeah.
that point. Wow. Okay.
yeah, that's what I'm saying, because this really sets the picture for me getting involved in my own stuff.
Got it.
Because by the time I got involved in my own stuff, like in my mind, like this was all normal to me. Like this was how life functioned and
Yeah.
operated.
Yeah.
You
It
know
was
what I
an
mean?
everyday thing for
And
you.
so like nobody else would, if like my mom wasn't telling me it was wrong, like,
Who
like
was? Yeah.
right. So like this is what it was. And so I think that experience was like a major like changer for me too, because when you feel that power and you're like involved in those type of things, like it's so much like of an adrenaline rush that you're like, man, like I can get and do and be whatever I want to do and be, like.
Yeah.
So once my mom moved away, I kind of was just in the streets. I went and stayed with my grandparents for a little bit because I was trying to finish school. I was going to Hayward Adult School to get my diploma. And I started doing crank here and there, coke, but it wasn't really my thing, like I mentioned before. And so I wasn't really into it. I was still just smoking weed and drinking.
Okay.
And so once I moved, then I started seeing my boyfriend, and I kind of like went over his house one time, stayed the night. Mind you, my mom had like moved to Sonora.
Yeah.
So like I'm out here completely alone. I'm like 16, 17. I think I was 17 at that time. And my boyfriend was like, my dad said you could stay. And I was like, okay, like it was all new to me, it was like honestly like my first boyfriend, but he was like, I already knew him because he was my cousin's best friend. So it was like we kind of already knew each other really well, And so once I moved in with him and his family, that's when I kind of really got involved in drugs. Like
Okay.
the guys would all kick it. I'd go. I met a few different friends that I've known for years that were really involved in like crystal and selling crystal meth and smoking meth, and I would go out here and there. And I had a friend that I grew up with from my Nina's neighborhood, because remind you, I used to go hang out at my Nina's house a lot when I was younger. And so I started hanging out with this girl, and you know, like I said, growing up in the lifestyle and all these, you know, my mom and dad always had all these homies and friends that were like uncle this and auntie that, right?
Yep.
And so when I started hanging out with this girl, there was one of my dad's homeboys that I grew up as Uncle so and so, right?
Okay.
And so we were all kicking it in her room, and that was the first time that I seen crystal meth being smoked, like pipe in the pipe.
Okay.
And I was not into that at all. And so Uncle so and so passed me the pipe, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where it just went from there.
So prior to that, were you just snorting it like coke? I mean,
Yeah, sometimes
Okay.
here and there, but I didn't really like the feeling. But smoking crystal was like a totally different thing. Like, and it just took off from there. So once I got involved in that, I was trying to finish school. So my addiction didn't really take off yet. And so I was getting loaded here and there. I would go hang out. I'd go spend the night at a friend's house. Most of the time I was home with my boyfriend or whatever.
Yeah.
And so we got into ecstasy pills. It was like the hyphy movement during that time. And like, you know, Fizz Nation, all that. So I was all into that. Like, we'd go out every weekend. We'd pop pills. And then that kind of like took over for a while.
Okay.
I was hooked on ecstasy pills, like really, really bad. And so,
well, I do like to hear, and I always ask this question with everybody that talks about their drug use. That first feeling that you got from hitting the pipe with
that
crank.
first feeling is something that's what you're chasing the whole time.
Yeah.
Like you'll never get it again. Like you'll
How
never.
did it make you feel though? What
It was
it?
so intense. I'll never forget it. It was like everything went away. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Everything went away. Like I became this whole new person. Like my entirety of being on this earth was like, oh, I can handle whatever.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I can handle whatever. Like it's all good. And so not realizing that I'm masking up all these feelings, it's taking away all of that stuff that I have stuffed deep inside through all these years, right?
Yeah.
And so like now being on my own and kicking it every weekend and being in a relationship and, you know, being away from my family and becoming part of somebody else's family, it became a really huge thing for me. I ended up getting pregnant and I was 19. So we were expecting. I would see my mom once in a while when she would come down. My little sister would come over for the weekends. By then she was like 5 or 6. And we would frequent my mom would bring my sister every weekend. And so like we got really tight. And then I got pregnant. And then at about 5.5 months, I started having complications. Okay. And so
were you using at that time?
I was.
You were?
I
okay.
was. Yeah.
Okay.
So I started having complications, and then I realized like, hey, I need to stop like doing what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. So I stopped smoking weed. I stopped popping pills. Mind you, at this point, I wasn't really smoking meth yet, like as often. And so once I had started having complications, I just like started chilling. I just chilled and I stayed at home. I was bedridden. The doctor had me like off my feet and stuff. And so I did that for a couple months. And then I was always like so tired and fatigued. I would like sleep 13 hours a day.
Yeah.
And by then I got this baby bump, and like I was 7.5 months pregnant and I lost my baby. Oh, wow. And then I was just getting ready to have a baby shower. Mm-hmm. I had a closet full of like baby clothes. And I remember I was so excited over this baby pillow, like the old school baby announcement pillows where you put their name and like all of that. And I was so juiced over that pillow because I had one from when I was a baby.
Yeah. And
I remember when that happened to me, it was so traumatizing. Like, oh, I want to get emotional. But
take your time. Take your time. I know that this is
it was
difficult
so
to talk about.
traumatizing for me. And so that's just when it all kicked in. Like, I remember I had to go through the closet. I had to get rid of all the baby clothes, that pillow I held on to for for such a long time. But that's when my addiction like kicked in.
Yeah.
I just didn't give a fuck. Like, I didn't care. For me, it was really hard because I felt like I didn't have anybody, and I couldn't, like, my mom was still deep in her addiction at that time too, my dad too, and so it was like, you know, I couldn't really like hold them for anything because like they were in their own
Yeah.
addictions, you know?
Yeah.
And like I'm trying to navigate and figure out life on my own at this time, and it just went full blown from there.
Yeah.
And
So
then,
it was more of a social thing prior, and then
yeah,
as soon as that
totally,
hit, it was just overdrive.
totally.
Yeah.
And then so once that happened, I just full blown started smoking crystal like almost every day. Like, it was a problem.
Yeah.
It was a problem. I hid from everybody. I hid from my boyfriend. Like, I'd be up all night, and I remember I used to have to like act like I was sleeping next to him. Like, I could literally see my heart beating because I'm trying to like act like I'm asleep, and I'm like wide awake. And it just became to the point where like I'm like, I can't do this. Like, we were still together. Like, we still lived at his parents' house. And so I started like going out. I started hanging around with all of my homies. I started kicking it with my homegirls that sold dope, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay. So I started dibbling here, dabbling there. And it got to the point where I came along to the opportunity of like, here's a pound of crystal. Like, what can you do with it?
Wow.
Right?
And this is from somebody you knew already?
Yeah, it was from a family member, right?
Wow. Jeez.
And so at that point, I'm like, let me show you what I could do, right? Like, by then I know everybody. I've been out in the scene. I've been getting high with everybody. Wasn't too much into like anything violent or anything yet, right? And so once I took on that, it was like a whole different person came, like supporting my own habit, like having it consistently.
Yeah. And you have an endless supply too, so
Right.
your addiction is probably getting worse
Right.
because of that. But you're out there also trying to make yourself money to
Right.
support your addiction.
And so, mind you, at that point, like, I have to protect myself. Like, I'm a female, right? So, like, I've seen what happens. I've seen how people are. I've seen what the drug could do. Mind you, from growing up to the violence, the gangs, and everything that I've seen as a child. So, mind you, all of that, like I said, like you said, the playbook was kicking in. So, like, I had already been trained for all this, right? So, by then, I'm like, okay, so I start selling dope. I'm getting, like, more and more popular, you know, like, out there in the streets. My cousins are like, hey, can you move these guns for me? And I'm like, yeah, let me see what, you know. So I start carrying guns, you know. Mind you, throughout the time, like, being on one, like, I'm like feeling like everybody's on me, like, oh, somebody's gonna try to rob me, you know. And
Paranoid.
like, you know, I'm trying to build like this name for myself in the streets. And so it started getting really, really out of hand with me and my boyfriend didn't use.
Yeah.
So it got to the point where he'd be like, I don't even know who I'm talking to anymore, right? And I'd be like, oh, like, we'd start getting into these arguments and these fights, and he'd get so frustrated where I remember we were fighting one time. We were in the carport of the apartments, and I'm like screaming on the top of my lungs, and I'm high. I'm higher than a kite. Yeah. And I'm thinking like, oh, he doesn't know. Like, you know, like he's not aware at all. Like, it's not obvious, you know? And he's like, what is wrong with you? He's just like, you know, trying to figure it out. And I'm like going off on him for no reason because I just want to leave, right?
Yeah,
I just want to go back out in the streets. And so I remember I said something to him, and he just, boom, he punched right past me and punched a hole in the wall. And I remember thinking in my mind, I was like, oh, he loves me. He loves me so much, right? Wow. And it just brought me back, like, to my mom and dad's relationship. and how that worked out. And like, that was normal to me. Like, he wanted to hit me, right? And I was like, oh my God, he loves me. Like, I need to be cool, right? Like, I need to be cool. So for a little while, I would stay home during the day, creep out at night, come home first thing in the morning when he's going to work, you know. I did that for a really, really long time. And then we were together for quite a while. And so at that time, I had
You translated that violence
into love, because that was the normalcy of it for me growing up,
Yeah.
right? And so I started like dibbling and dabbling with a little bit of fraud, right? That bit me in the ass really quick, because that didn't work out for me at all. That was not my thing.
Yeah.
And so I caught my first case, right? I went to jail. I was in Santa Rita for a little bit.
So when you were selling and rolling around with dope, guns, all that, you never got picked up, or
Not yet.
Okay, I
Right?
got it.
Not yet. So that was my first experience with jail. So I went to Santa Rita, never had a record, never had been in trouble. So they kind of like just let me go. But now, mind you, now I have that experience. So now I have a PFN number,
Yeah.
right? So, and so
What
that
was it like first day?
first day, I'll never forget it. I was like, oh my God, like the smell, I couldn't, I was like, the cages, the cell, like just the whole process, being in the holding tank for hours and hours, and it just stinks and it's bad. Like, I
Yeah.
remember that first experience being like, this is not a place for no woman to be, like, whatsoever.
Yeah.
But you know, at that time I was like, I didn't care. I was just trying to get out of there, right?
Yeah.
And so I just remember, as soon as I got to the bunk, they call it a blanket, but it was like, it reminded me of the movies of like those green, like scratchy wool looking army blankets
yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
And I remember I was freaked out, and I just laid down and I covered my head, and I'll never forget the smell of that blanket. And I was like, oh my God, like, what are you doing? Right? And then kind of like fell asleep, and then they called my name. They were releasing me. So I was like glad to just get up out of there. So now I have a record, right? So things got really rocky between me and my boyfriend at the time. Some stuff happened between us, and we ended up breaking up. By then, we had our own house. We had lived together. We had been together almost 9 years. And at this point, I was blowing up in the streets, selling. We had our first house, and I was selling dope out of our house, and while he was at work. And so it just became a lot. And like, he would come home, and I would have my homies and my cousins and everybody in the living room playing PlayStation and stuff and kicking it. And he's like, what is going on? You know what I mean? And he was involved. He was like gang affiliated too, but like drugs and stuff wasn't his thing at all, like at all. And so
What kind of work was he doing?
it's just my cousins. He was doing, at that time, they were doing sandblasting.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was working all day,
Yeah.
you know. And I had like a little side job. I worked at Togo's for a little while, ended up selling dope out of Togo's. Like during lunch hour, like I would have all my people in the line. I'm like dealing dope out of Togo's bags, you know? And so at this point, it was just out of control. Out of control. We ended up breaking up, lost our house. And once I didn't have to hide from anybody, and I was alone and free, that's when it all began. Like, I spiraled so bad.
How were you
Like,
getting away with the Togo stuff? Like selling through there?
it was a lot. It was a lot
Really?
because I ended up, and here's the thing for me, like, I turned out like almost every person that I worked with, like got them loaded, got them hooked. So
Sold them on the fact of using it
on
and how
everything.
great it is. And then,
So everybody there would be high,
Yeah.
except our boss, you know, and he was rarely there. And I was a lead manager, so like I was the supervisor at
Yeah.
the time, and had all these youngsters loaded out their minds and just ran the store every day. Like everybody did their job, but
So when
like
some people came in that you knew, okay, they're here for this,
yeah,
and you would just put it in their bag instead of the food or with the food.
they would buy food too. Yeah.
Jeez.
And it was crazy. Like I did that for a long, long time. Like maneuvered, manipulated, moved the cameras, like knew the whole place, like to the point where it was just my way, right?
Yeah.
And so did that for quite some time. Once we broke up, I ended up quitting my job and just full time went to selling dope. Excuse me. And then after that, it was just a spiral. Like, I remember I got heavily into, the gang life. And by then, like, I was well respected in the streets. Like, everybody would be like, oh, that's so-and-so's daughter. Or, oh, that's so-and-so's cousin. Like, be cool.
Did you have a nickname back then?
I did.
You did?
My nickname was Bear.
Bear?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's funny that you asked that because like nobody, now that I go by my name, like everybody's like, who? So, but everybody knew Bear.
Yeah.
Everybody knew who Bear was, right? And so it got to the point where I became that really, really violent person. I became that.
Why Bear?
My dad's nickname was also.
Okay. Got it. So
And
you're
I
like
was
the
Little
baby bear, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that kind of came and stuck. I guess my dad would always be like, that was my son that I never had. Like, I'd be like, man, I am a grown woman.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, and like I mentioned before, like that pride and ego kicked in. Like, yeah, I'm so-and-so's daughter. But then it got to the point where like, fuck that. Like, I'm me. I'm Bear, right?
Yeah.
And once I got in that mentality, it was just over. Like, I became this ugly person. Like, now when I think about it and I think back to like how many lives I messed up and like how many people that I hurt and like so many things. Like, I remember one time I had just bought this little 5.0 and I was terrorizing Hayward in this car, right? And I always had a Glock with me. Always. That was my favorite piece. And so everybody knew if Bear was carrying two purses, watch out. Because one was the purse and one was the piece, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember I was in the Ramos and I was at the 24-hour donut shop and I had like about $10,000 on me. It was like the end of a good couple day run. And I was in front of the donut shop and I had bought some scratchers and I was scratching scratchers. And I was about to call it a night. And I was standing out there in front of the donut shop. And usually there was a lot of people out there. And I remember it was kind of eerie. And I was like looking around, and I'm high, but I was always fully aware of my surroundings. And so I remember feeling like somebody was watching me. And so like I'm scratching and I'm like, but at the same time, like I'm looking, and I remember these two cars pulled up, one on each side of my car. And as soon as they pulled up, I realized who it was. It was one of these fools from the neighborhood that was no good, right?
Okay.
And meaning like he was no good in the game anymore.
Yeah.
And so like there was money on his head and like he was up to no good. So if you seen him, either get at him or leave,
Yeah.
right? And so as soon as I seen him pull up, I'm like, oh, okay. That was that feeling that I was having, right? And so at this point, I'm willing to do whatever I had to do to protect myself, right?
Yeah.
And so I get in my car and it was him on this side and it was a female on this side. And as I'm getting in the car, I'm watching both of them so they don't think I see them, but they make eye contact with each other and he gave her the signal. So she gets out the car and as I'm getting in my car, I'm reaching back and I'm grabbing my gun, right?
Yeah.
And then so I'm already started the car. She goes around and I don't know if she was coming to my side of the car or if she was going to his car to jump in with him. But immediately, as soon as I start my car, he starts his car. I back out and I go out and they're chasing me. We're literally driving down Grand in Hayward.
Yeah.
And I just let him go. Boom, 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 boom. Start just shooting at the car. And I already know what his MO was. Like, they were going to try to rob me, is
Yeah.
what was going to happen. And so
Does he know who you are, though?
he does.
Okay.
Yeah, he totally does.
So he knows
And
you got money on you. He knows what you're
totally,
doing. Okay.
he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
They had probably been watching me and probably like knew, because that would be my thing. Sometimes I'll go to the donut shop at the end of the
Yeah.
night and whatever, and sell a little bit more dope while I was out there, because there'd be the little, scragglers out there or whatnot,
Yeah.
late night creepers. And so I already knew what he was up to. And so I just remember driving down Grand, and I just out the window, boom, 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 let off like 6 rounds.
Yeah.
And at that time, I was just like, oh shit, like I needed to get to where I needed to go, right? And so I remember I pulled up to one of these people's house who I used to sell dope to. And I'm like, I need to wash my hands. I need to do all this. I need to, I don't know if I hit him or not. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But all I know is after I let loose, they weren't following me anymore. And so that was like the first time that feeling of like power and like the adrenaline mixed with it, and like really knowing and proving to myself like, oh, you're fully capable of doing this.
Yeah.
You're fully capable of shooting somebody, and you're fully capable of going into beast mode when you need to protect you and yours, right? And at that time, it kind of scared me. It scared me a little bit, because I was like, what does this mean for me, right? What does this mean for me? Like, like you're capable of taking somebody's life. You know what I mean? And so at that time, things just got worse and worse. And
did you ever find out if you hit them or anything happened? Nothing came up?
never asked.
Wow.
Never even. And, for a long time.
'Cause the hood talks.
The hood does talk.
Nobody
but
said
I'm going to tell
anything,
you that he wasn't around for a long time.
Wow.
So, yeah, but after that, like, I got really big headed. I really did. I'm not even going to lie. Like, I got to the
more
point
invincible?
where I'm like, man, I'm unstoppable. Like, can't nobody tell me shit. Not to mention that, like, on the drop of a dime, if something was wrong, I'm like, what? I'm beating people up left and right, fighting men, fighting women, like it was just a full-blown beast mode.
Yeah.
Full-blown beast mode. And
are you doing this solo, or you have a crew
solo.
with you? Just
no,
wow.
Solo. And at that time, my family had got involved in some stuff. My Nina that I told you that I was always with had got, my family was selling dope, and like got involved in some federal stuff. And like at that time, I started getting back involved with my cousin again, and moved back in with my Nina. And so we had this big, there was this big drug ring going, and everybody ended up, getting involved. And we had went to Guam, and like did all this, extravagant stuff, like we thought, right? And my family ended up getting caught up in like doing years and years and years in prison. A lot of people involved snitched, and just got my family all caught up.
This is the federal case that you're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so
what was it about? Just drugs?
just drugs. Yeah, I don't want to really speak too much about it, because that's not too much of my story.
Got it.
But a lot of that piece brings me to another part of my life when things got hectic. And so once I had went with my family, right? And then when I came back, we had made a lot of money.
Yeah.
A lot of money. And so we're living recklessly. We're buying cars. We got the shoes, clothes, cars, jewelry. We're partying every day, buying $200-$300 bottles of tequila, and, just living that life, and it's obvious, like, who's doing what. Like, we're probably creating more heat on ourselves than anything, So at that point in my prime, that part of it made me blow up, made my head so big. And, we were all well known. By then, everybody started getting greedy, started getting greedy. At this time, I'm kicking it with all these different fools. I'm going and kicking in doors, get pistol whipping people, just all around, like in every city.
Is
Like
this collecting money, or is this just you robbing houses and
just
doing?
just whatever the situation was.
Got it.
Whatever the situation was.
Okay.
If it was money owed, if it was a robbery, if it was somebody needed a ride to do a I was involved in all of it. And at that time, like all the stuff that's happening with my family, I would do my part. I would bring my dope. I would do my part. And then everybody started getting greedy, right? And so I remember at that time, I pretty much just was greedy myself. And I was getting ready to go. We were supposed to catch a flight. And now that I think about it, how much God had his hand on my life this whole time, like through everything, that was one of those God shot moments for me that kept me out of all of that stuff. And so I went to go pick up my portion and got hit on the way back to the house to go catch a flight. I got pulled over and got arrested. And
Okay.
I had a half a pound of dope on me, right?
Yeah.
Being greedy, because I was not supposed to take that with me. I was trying to make extra money, so I left real quick and went to go do that and got hit on the way back.
Yeah.
So as I'm getting handcuffed, it was because I had a warrant for a parking ticket or some kind of ticket, something so stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm in the back of the cop car and I have dope in my pockets. Like I couldn't hide it or tuck it or anything. Like I was like, oh my God, like, all right, it's happening, right? So I go to jail. I get arrested by Hayward. I get into the city jail and we're doing the whole thing, the whole process. And the police, she's patting me down and she's like, what is this?
Wow.
So there's my first real case, right?
Yeah.
My first real case. At that time, they were pretty heavy fisted, on drugs, and so the amount of drugs that it was, and so I caught my first sales case.
Yeah.
And they threw the book at me. They threw the book at me for sure. I ended
You didn't
up
have a gun at the time, though?
no, thankfully, yeah, because I was getting ready to go catch a flight. So to me though, that was where God steered me from catching that federal case. Because if I would have caught that flight, I would have been involved in all of that, right? And so here I am, caught my first case. I'm doing a year in Santa Rita, ended up with 5-year felony, and that's just how my career with jail started.
Yeah.
And while
So they put you on probation?
they
5 years?
did,
Yeah.
they did, and so while I'm in jail doing my time is when all the stuff is transpiring with my family. Everybody's getting caught up.
So how
feds.
much time did they get? Or, I mean, was
So my family, between my two family members, they ended up doing almost 10 years combined.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And you got a year. So
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. On my way, right?
Yeah.
And so I always think about that. Like I always think about that. And it always makes me feel like God has always been protecting me, right? Through all the crazy things that I've done. But that didn't stop me. Like that jail time did not stop me, because as soon as I got out, it just got worse and worse and worse and worse for me. And so at that point was probably my breaking point. Like when all the things that, oh, I'll never do this, oh, I'll never do that, is when the never do's kicked in, right?
Yeah.
So by that time, like everything had faded down. And when I came home, I was just doing the most. I was full blown in my addiction.
Still using crank
still
meth.
still
Yeah.
using meth. Wasn't really selling dope that much. I started becoming more of a user than anything.
Got it.
And so my mind, every time I get loaded, I'd be so tweaked out, like the feds are watching me, the feds are following me, because everything with my family, it just became this obsession, and I couldn't function. I could not function, you know. All my family that I was close with was in prison. My mom, my dad were still doing their thing, and it was hard. It
Yeah.
was hard, like being alone. And so, like I said, all those things that, oh, I would never do this and I would never do that, started kicking in, you know.
Yeah.
You start, you know, I was doing fraud for a little while. That didn't work out, like I said before, because, you know, you get involved with people that you never would want to be involved with, and then things happen. I remember I was busting checks with this girl for a little while, and her boyfriend was a big homie, and things happened, and I remember they were trying to blame me for a whole bunch of stuff that was going on, and that we all did together, and somebody was snitching on the circle. And so I remember he was terrorizing everybody who was in the circle, and he caught up to me, and I was just like, you know, like at that time I was so appalled that you would even be trying to, like, do you know who I am?
Yeah.
Right? Like, do you know who you're talking to? Like, how dare you even try to accuse me of anything like that? And holding mine down. And I remember we were in a motel room full of people. I was with my dude at the time, and they came in there like gangbusters, pistols out, everything, and pistol with me really bad. Like, and I would not stop. I was like, you know, you're wrong for this. Like, you know, you're wrong. Because what he was accusing me of, like, I didn't do.
Yeah.
And like, I wasn't backing down. Like, I didn't give a fuck. Like, you're not going to accuse me of something I didn't do. Like, I'll claim mines. Right.
Yeah.
But this is not it. Like, this isn't me.
Yeah.
So, and I think at that point, like, that situation changed me. Like for the gang involvement and just the lifestyle, like something happened at that moment. Like, anybody could just say whatever they want to say about you, and then it's okay, right? And I felt like when all of that happened, nobody protected me. Like, all the people that I looked up to, you know, my dad, my cousins that were like my brothers, all of my homies, nobody took care of the situation, right?
Yeah.
And at that point in time, I think that really like changed something for me. And in that time, the person that the dude that I was involved with, we started doing the most. And at that time, just my mentality was totally different. Like, I gave up. Like, I became the user and not the dealer, right? Started robbing people's houses. I remember somebody put me on to, when people, you know, when they're, the pest control is spraying people's houses, they put the big tents over it, right?
Yeah.
So those were my licks. When that tent, everybody's stuff is still in that house,
Yeah.
right? So I would start hitting. I remember I was with one of my homies, and he put me onto it, and we would go and wear masks. I remember the mask that the painters would wear.
Yeah.
This was way before COVID,
Yeah.
so we didn't have no masks, you know, but the ones that the painters would wear, and we'd go in them houses that were tinted up with bug spray and hit licks.
And nobody can see you.
Nobody.
Yeah.
So we were coming up, okay? We were coming up, and I did this for quite some time. And that same homie would like started robbing fools and shooting at fools. And so that was kind of like my person for a minute. He passed away. He got murdered. So like that piece of my life is like all of those, everything that I said I would not do, I did. And it took a toll on me because
How long did that last,
it
though? You
lasted for
guys
quite some
hitting those
time.
kind of houses?
Like 3 years we did that,
Holy shit!
robbing
Wow.
people, laying people down, you know, beating people up, pistol whipping people, just, I mean, bloody scenes like that. Nobody, it just shooting people. And, you know, some nights I'd be just sit in the car in the dark with a hoodie on,
Yeah.
with a gun, because I'd be like, somebody's gonna come back for me, like,
Yeah.
why, in my mind, I would be like, why hasn't any of this caught up to me yet? That's
Yeah.
all I would think about, and
Yeah.
that would keep me
But you're doing
going and
so
high.
much
Like,
to so many people
it
that
was
you
so
knew it was coming.
much, and everybody knew who I was, and everybody knew who they were, and everybody knew where and who, and like you said, the hood talks. And so for a minute, like, I got this reputation of, like, you know, watch out for her.
Yeah.
Like, don't let Bear in. Oh, Bear's with you? Nah, you can't come in. And it would piss me off because I would be like, why are they acting like I'm a bully or something? I ain't no bully, right?
Yeah.
Everybody that knows me from back then, that knows me now, be cracking up when I say that, because they're like, okay.
So you think it was fear of you being around, or was the trust not there, or what was it?
Probably a little bit of both.
Okay.
I mean, not knowing, because like I said, it didn't have to have a reason. You didn't have to have a real reason. Like, if it was just in the mood, we was just in the mood. Like, if
Okay.
you were getting took, we were going to take your shit. Or,
Period.
if you said something wrong, you're going to get pistol whipped or shot or beat up,
Okay.
anything, And so that, them like 3 years of just straight violent activity for me, like, it took a toll on me, because I started going to jail. I started, catching cases. And like I mentioned, after that first year that I did, when I got out, I was on 5-year felony probation. And that kind of just did me in, because I would spend, most of my time locked up. And it got to the point where, like, I was getting older, and my mom, was like getting tired of my shit too. And like,
Yeah.
my mom always had my back, always took care of me. My mom and my grandma, my dad's mom. And then it just got to the point where, like, doing a bunch of things, that nobody should be doing. Like, stealing from people, and all of those
Family?
friends, and yeah, from
Family too?
family,
Yeah.
from friends, from people that I knew for years, for no reason, just to get high, or just to, it got to the point where I was at my lowest. And I think, once I hit that rock bottom, I'm breaking into cars, I'm stealing cars, I'm, I'm at people's houses, walking all night, waiting for people to have their cars run into their driveway in the morning when they're getting ready to go to work, and I jump in their
Jump in.
car and smash off,
Yeah.
like, and going
Did
from,
you learn how to actually steal cars though? Start them, do it? No. Okay.
no. That wasn't my thing either. But let somebody's car be on and running, and yeah, I would.
Got it.
But it just got to a point where I was just like tired, right?
Yeah.
I got so tired. I was tired of being in jail all the time. I was tired of missing out. I think I even shared a photo with you of my first Christmas. It's the first Christmas that I had in, like, every year for 5 years straight. I was in jail for Christmas, birthday, everything.
Yeah.
And I remember that Christmas was so special to me, because my family was like, damn, you're home.
Yeah.
Right? You're home. And so first time I had seen a Christmas tree in 5 years. And it just became a rotating door, a rotating door. Nothing was working out for me anymore. By then, I owed people money. Nobody wanted to front me any dope. Nobody wanted to hand me pounds of dope anymore. The involvement of everything that happened with my family, I think, took a big toll on that too,
Yeah.
and and then them years of just violence, and that trust and that fear was there, like you said, and so, like, it became a thing to where, I felt weak, and I felt like it was over for me, right? I'm like, it's over. And so, like, I was just living to get high. Like, I was just day by day doing whatever, kicking it with whoever, just to get myself high. By then, I'm living in and out of motels.
Mm.
With some youngster. We were together for a little while, but like, he didn't do nothing for me. Like we were just like, enabling each other's addictions,
Yeah.
and trying to figure out what we're gonna do for the next day. I mean, we would go to this one specific store and like go through the parking lots. This was my lowest, okay? This was
Yeah.
my lowest. We'd go in the parking lots, we'd pick up the receipts off the ground, go into the store, fill the carts up with everything that were on that receipt,
Yeah.
and go take it straight to the return and get the money. And we did that every day for about 6 to 8 months, every day.
And they didn't think
And
twice
we
about it?
started going to it's a pretty big store, right?
Yeah.
But we started going to the same store in all different cities, and that was our hustle. That was our hustle every day. It paid for our motel room, it paid for our bag of dope, it paid for our food for the night, and that was that. Then we started doing gift cards. That was something that kind of like picked everything back up for us, put us on our feet. And basically, you would go get a stack of gift cards. Excuse me, go get a stack of gift cards out of the store, peel off the number, the little seal over the number. We would write the numbers down, or if they had the little part that came off with the barcode
Yeah.
that you scanned, you'd have a stack of the ones you're keeping. You'd have the other stack. You'd switch the barcodes. We just break them off, super glue it back on.
Yeah.
And then you go put the gift cards back in the store. And so whoever was purchasing them gift cards was not getting their money, because we had either the other side with the card that had the barcode, or we
Wow.
had all the list of the numbers specific to like the Visa gift cards. You couldn't like trade the thing because it was a card, so we would have to write the numbers down and trade the card out.
Yeah.
So that picked me back up. Like, that was the lowest part, I think, of my life, of like doing stuff that, after hustling and being selling dope for all them years, and being used to having thousands and thousands of dollars in my pocket, to like doing that type of stuff. I was like, man, like, I need to do something with myself. And so
How much were you making doing that though?
we made a lot of money. Like, we would sell them half price, just depending, or order stuff from online and sell it, And so we was making anywhere from like $500 to $1,000 a day.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
And so once that started, that kind of like put me back on. I remember it was Christmas time. The gift cards hit, and I'd made like $5,000. And so with that, I took that money, recopped some dope, and got back in business again.
Yeah.
And so after that little bit of time of like, being homeless and just being around a bunch of people that I really never would have been around any other time before, kind of like put me back on. And so once I got back on, I moved back home. I moved in with my dad. And at that time, my dad was still hooked on heroin really bad.
Okay.
My dad was, drank alcohol his whole life too. So he has cirrhosis of the liver. And I would be in and out of jail still. Started selling dope again, making money. Got back to where I kind of was before. And then my dad got really sick.
Okay.
And then when my dad got sick, something happened to where he stopped doing heroin, but he was so sick, he was taking pills. The doctor was giving him like morphine, Vicodins, and Xanax, all those different pills, that are really bad for you. And he gave up heroin finally and got hooked on these pills.
Same
So
thing, pretty much, though,
same
right?
exact
Oh,
thing,
yeah,
trading one thing for the other.
yeah,
But it was 10 times worse because he's popping 10 volumes, 10 morphine pills, all at the same time.
yeah.
And so it got to the point where my dad got sick, and I was back living at home with him. And excuse me, once he got to the point, he had a flesh disorder where it was like open wounds from shooting up
Yeah,
heroin
yeah,
his whole life. And so there'd be like his legs would have to be wrapped because it was like literally raw flesh. Like he used to have to go get it cleaned, and it was just like a really painful thing for him. So once my dad like lost his ability to like walk, function, like take care of himself, you know what I mean?
hmm,
Like that took a toll on my dad. Like I told you, he was like real machismo, and so like I could tell like my dad was like, it was killing him slowly,
hmm,
like it was taking like his pride away. Like he felt weak, he couldn't protect himself any longer, he
yeah,
couldn't, and so being there with my dad during that time was hard for me because my dad was like, that was my,
yeah.
that was my everything. That was, that was our strength,
He was the bear,
and
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And watching my dad like be insecure
Hmm.
or like second guess himself or like depend on other people was hard.
Yeah,
It was hard. So like at that point in time, I was already feeling tired, like tired of everything, tired of the game. Started thinking like, I need to do something with myself. I was started looking for a job. I wanted to go back to school, and I remember I was kicking in with one of my homies, and he was like, Barry, you're really smart. He's like, you should go back to school. And growing up, like I always got straight A's until I like didn't, and then like I was always a good student and smart at everything, but getting involved in all that just kind of, the trajectory changes. And
yeah.
so
Derailed you, so
it
it keeps you.
totally
Yeah,
did. And so once my dad got sick and watching that happen to my dad, like kind of gave me a soft spot. Like, I'm like, damn, like this game really can take over,
yeah.
And so slowly but surely, my dad got worse and worse. And I thank God, like of all times, because I was in jail all the freaking time, like doing 6 month stints, 9 months. I had finally caught my first prison term, and they had just passed the law that you take prison time and it's half time.
Hmm.
So I never went to prison. I did my 18 months in Santa
Santa
Rita.
Rita, yeah.
So then I came home and I had,
Yeah, you could do up to like 5 years in Santa Rita,
Santa
right?
Rita now,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yep. So
Wow.
I had just when I finally caught my first prison term, that was what had happened to me. So I had spent like almost 2 years in Santa Rita. But luckily, like at that time when my dad got sick, I wasn't, I been out of jail for quite a while, right?
Hmm.
And I like broke a record. Like I'd been home for a little bit. And so like I said, like God has always had his hand on my life, right?
Yeah,
And like at that moment, I know that was a God shot because I was able to take care of my dad till his last breath, right?
wow. Yeah,
And so when that happened, it was hard. It was hard. I remember my dad's last day alive. My dad had a couple of his friends who were also my friends too, that I've known for many years. We were chilling and my dad was starting to get delirious. Like he was on his last leg, and it was really hard. And I had just showered him up, got his legs wrapped up, got him all comfy, got him in bed. And I was exhausted. Like I had been at it for days because my dad was hella sick like a couple of days before. He had like 102 temperature. He was like,
yeah.
shivering and stuff. So I knew something was going on with him. He didn't want to go to the doctor, so it was real hard to like get him to the doctors. But I remember the last night he was all tucked in and got them all in bed. And I'm in the living room with my homies, and we're sitting there, and I was like, oh my God, I remember, like, I'm so tired, right? Like, I'm so tired. And at this point in time, I was over it. Like, honestly, like, I had kept having these thoughts of like, what are you doing with yourself? Like, where are you going in life?
Yeah.
Like I was getting tired. And so, not even thinking like, oh, my dad's about to die, or my life's about to completely change, right? And so I was sitting there, and I hear my dad talking. Like, after 20 minutes, I hear my dad having a full-blown conversation. And I'm like, Dad, are you cool? And he's like, blah, 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 blah. Like somebody's in there with him. And I'm
Yeah.
looking at my homies, like, they're looking at me. And so I get up and I go in there and I turn on the light, and I'm like, and he's sitting straight up, and he's just talking away. Like, if somebody was sitting on the edge of his bed.
Mm.
And he's like, I'm talking to Christina. And I'm like, who? I'm like, and then it clicks in my mind, and he's like, hold on, hold on, hold on. Who wrote? He had these two big white closet doors. And he's like, Mija, who the fuck wrote all over my closet? And I'm like, I'm looking, and I'm like, what? And then it dawns on me, I'm like, he's seeing things. Like, he's
Yeah.
delirious. Like, I was looking at him, and he was there, but he wasn't there.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I'm like, is my dad like crossing over right now? And I'm like trying to like process and accept like what is happening, because I can feel it. I knew what was happening. And I'm like, Dad, there's nothing there. You know, like, you're scaring me. Like, there's nothing there. And he's like, starts getting up, and he's like, I want to put my clothes on. And I'm like, no, 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 no. So finally I got him back in bed, and I'm like, what the heck is happening? So night turned into morning. And as soon as morning hit, he was just jabbering, and he's seeing things, and mind you, he has these open wound legs that he can even walk, and he's walking all over. He's trying to put on his clothes. And I'm like, Dad, what is going on? Like, you're scaring me. And he's like, can't talk. He's like, and I'm like, okay, something's happening. So I panic, and I'm like, I call my mom and my sister, and I'm like, I think my dad is dying. Like, you guys need to come over here right now.
Yeah.
Because me and my mom at that time weren't like really getting along. But in my mind, I'm like, if something's happening to my dad and I don't call my mom and my sister, they're going to hate me,
Yeah.
you know?
Yep.
Like, if this is the last times, and it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
My mom and my sister need to be here. So my mom and my sister came quick, and my mom was like, we need to call 911. And so we called 911, and it was so funny because my dad, we were like, are you hungry? He was like, yeah. And my dad's favorite was peanut butter and jelly. So I'm in the kitchen. I made him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich real quick. And by then he's like weak. Like, he can't even keep his head up. And so I'm holding his head, and I'm like, you want to take a bite? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, Mija, he was like, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what? He was like, I love you. I was like, I love you too, Dad. You know, and I can see that he was leaving in his eyes.
Yeah.
It's so hard to describe, but it was such a great feeling to know that I got to be there till the last minute. And of all the times and that I've been locked up and missed so much, you know, that I was there and I was present, and I was like, okay, this is really happening. And so the paramedics came, we cleared the way, and they're like, who gave him peanut butter and jelly? And I was like, oh, I did. They're like, he could have choked. And I was like, my bad. And so I remember they put my dad on the stretcher, and they were rolling him to the back of the ambulance. And I just remember I seen his arm just go limp. And in my mind, I was like, no, this isn't happening, right? I was like, no, this isn't happening. And my mom and my sister were in a better space in, mentally than I was at that time. And all I wanted to do was still just get high, right? And so my mom and my sister immediately like followed the ambulance. I'm like, I'm done. You guys go handle that part. So I was at the house and I was getting loaded. And I remember a few hours had went by, and I have an older cousin who's my dad's brother's son. Straight as an arrow. I mean, all around great dude, like great man. Never got involved in none of the bullshit we
Okay.
did.
Yeah.
And just good man all the way around. And my cousin was always like out the way, And I remember going to the hospital. They called me. They're like, you need to come over here. My homie drove me over there to St. Rose. And I walked in and everybody's there. And they're in that little room. And I'm like, damn it. My dad either died or he's about to die. And so I go in the little room, and mind you, like I wasn't always my grandparents' favorite. Like I had stole from them and just, never was around.
And you're high at this time?
Yeah, I'm high,
Yeah.
right? And I go in the little room, and my grandma and grandpa embraced me. And that was probably the first time that they had shown me any kind of love since I was little, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, this is really happening. Like I'm trying to get an acceptance, right? Because I'm loaded, but I know that if I don't get in full-blown acceptance, I'm going to run, right? Because that's all I ever knew how to do was run.
Mm-hmm.
Go shoot at somebody, go beat somebody's ass, or go get in trouble and go back to jail so I don't have to deal with nothing, right? So I could just be in my little cell and not have to deal with the world, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, everything's hitting me all at once. And I'm like, man, okay, this is happening. And my grandma was like, I'm sorry, but, you have to make the decision of what to do with your dad. And I was like, why me? And she's like, you're his next of kin. And I was like, damn. So this all happened, like, mind you, in like a 20-minute time span. All these emotions are happening. I'm high out of my mind. And I'm just like, okay, we go in the room with my dad, and like reality struck. High completely went away. Every feeling in the world was there. My mom's there, my sister's there, and they're like, we have to pull the plug. And I was like, sorry.
Take your time.
I was like, my dad is still breathing, But he was like, everything, his oxygen it was too low. Like, we had to pull the plug. Like, there was no, like, trying to hold on. And I'm like, can you give me more information first? Like, this is a really hard decision to make.
Yeah.
Under my circumstances. Like, I had never had to be responsible for nothing, but myself.
Yeah.
No life, no kids, no nothing. That's why I just was able to run amok, And when it got to that point of having to make that decision, I wanted to talk to the doctor first, and the doctor, started telling me everything. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, pros and cons. And I remember squeezing my dad's hand like this, and I can see my thumb, the blood rushing away, right? It would turn white.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, he's still alive. And I gotta take my dad's life, right? And so that was one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make.
Yeah, I can imagine. And at that time, you're not even really in your right mind, right?
Not at all.
Yeah.
So I was like, still manipulating. I said, I can't do this right now, right?
Yeah.
I can't do this right now. Like, I need some time. And the doctor was like, okay, no rush. So I went home. I was like, I need to go get high. I went home and I got loaded and I was like, fuck everyone. Like, I'm not doing this. They could do that shit without me. Like, you guys been doing everything without me. Like, you know.
Yeah.
And I was in the house. I had the stereo blasting. I'm high as a kite. I'm all over the place. And I remember I see a shadow I'm in my room and I can see the shadow reflection because the front door was facing the wall. And I see a shadow and I hear somebody banging on the screen door. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, honestly, I was like, fuck it. And I wasn't even gonna go look. Like, but I went and I peeked around, I looked, and it was my cousin. And I was like, oh shit. Like, he was probably one of the only people ever in life, besides my grandparents, my dad's parents, that I didn't come around high. Like, I didn't expose none of my life like that to him. And if I ever was around him, like, I wasn't loaded or,
Yeah.
I just
Got it.
avoided him, all the way. And my cousin was standing there and I was like, oh, in my mind, I'm like, oh, they're good. They sent him to come get me, right? And he's like, cousin. And I'm like, yeah. And I open the screen door and he's like, what are you doing? And I was like, nothing. He's like, you need to go handle your business. And I was like, damn, this is for real. And I just broke down, bawling, crying, right? And my cousin hugged me and he's like, I know. He's like, I know, right? And he's like, but you need to go handle your business. And I'm like, all right. So I got myself together. I went back to the hospital. And by then, there was so many people there when I walked in. And it was such a beautiful sight because all of my dad's folks, all of, homies, family, friends from everywhere just filled the whole hallway, like the little room, standing outside of his room.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like that really made me feel like the love for my dad, right? And I was like, man, okay. And I went and signed the paper, and then my dad took his last breath at 7:27 on August 23rd, 2016. And so he died 3 days before his 49th birthday.
Oh man. Wow.
And so 727 is real significant for us. So me, my mom, my sister, our family, every time we see 727, like, that's dad,
Yeah.
And what's a trip is, like, my mom's old address was 727. So, like, it's always around, it's like every time we see it or see 727, we're like, that's dad. And so was that the end of it for me? No, but I maintained my dad's house for a little while. But when my dad died, something happened. Like, something happened for me. Something broke inside of me. Like, I was desperate. I was done. I remember feeling like, man, I don't even want to be alive. And I had never, ever had no, like, suicidal thoughts or any thoughts of, like, death, or never, ever felt like that, And so I remember having that feeling for the first time. Like, oh, I don't even want to be here, right?
Yeah.
And I started having people in and out of my house. I took over on my dad's house, started paying the rent, started, like, packing up all my dad's stuff.
He was still living in Hayward?
Yeah,
Okay.
we still lived in Hayward. We had lived in the same house for about 10 years. And I inherited my dad's 64 Impala.
Oh, wow.
So I still have it. So once all that took place, I was still getting loaded. But by then I was, like, desperate, like that desperation was kicking in of wanting change. Like I had mentioned before, there was already months and months and months before where I was already tired. And so things started dwindling down. I started kicking it with a bunch of scantless people, and like my house got robbed. They broke into our house and like ransacked everything. Didn't really take anything. But it was just the thought of like, like my dad just died, and like,
Oh yeah. They don't
like
care.
nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. And so I was selling dope again, and just, hanging out with one of my homies, and he was like into downers and like liquid morphine. And I remember there was 2 bottles of liquid morphine in the refrigerator. And I got up
Your dad's medication.
and I went to, no, this
No.
was
Oh.
just something that my homie had. My dad was already gone.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, I could drink this right now, right? And just be done. And then I was at the refrigerator door, and I picked up the bottle, and I really, really wanted to do it. Like I really did. And I was like, dang. I put it back. I closed the refrigerator, and I sat down, and I was like, is this the point that I'm at? Like, is this where I'm at? It took me so much to like get through my dad's funeral. Like I had to plan everything. I stood at my dad's casket the whole 2 days. Like I don't remember who was there. I don't remember who talked to me. I remember my earring fell out of my ear and into the casket with my dad, and it got buried with him because
Yeah.
I didn't want to reach in there. But I remember that feeling of like emptiness and like not wanting to live. Like I never, of all the stuff I've been through my whole life, I never felt like that. But at this point, that desperation was kicking in.
Yeah.
And it really like something clicked for me that day. And I sat down and I like thought about everything, like really thought about everything. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, right? Like I don't want to do this anymore. And things just got worse and worse. And I remember I was like, would get high and just walk the streets aimlessly, like going nowhere to go, nothing to do. I'm just walking and walking. Like mentally, I felt like I was losing it. Like
You were checked out.
totally, like completely checked out. And it was scary because I'd never felt like that before. And so I remember I was talking to this dude, and he was in jail, and I was trying to put money on my phone so I can accept his calls. Had somebody give me a ride. Something was wrong with my phone, so I needed a ride to T-Mobile. They dropped me off at T-Mobile, and then got my phone fixed, whatever. Walked all the way back home, mind you, from like one end of Hayward to the other.
Yeah.
When I got home that night, one of my friends had came over that I grew up with, and we were getting high together. And she was into fraud and like mailboxes and all that, stealing people's mail and all that kind of stuff. And she was like, come with me. And I was like, all right. And we're driving through Hayward, and we pull up to this one street, and somebody's car was running in front of their house.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, let me out. I need a car. Because like I'm tired of walking around aimlessly, right? So I hop out. I go to get in the car. She's still behind me. I go to reverse and crash into her.
Wow.
This boom alerts the people, and they come out of their house. It just happened to be like this. Just my luck. Happened to be like a Samoan family. And they're all real big, and they rip me out of the car, and I'm like, damn, about to get my ass beat.
Yeah.
So,
Did you?
I did.
You
I
did.
did what I had to do. I got on, I started off fighting the girl, and then it just got worse and worse. And so they ended up all jumping me, beat me up pretty bad, and then called
Your
the
friend leave?
friend left
Took
me,
off. Yeah.
completely left me.
Of course.
You know it.
Mm-hmm.
Skirted off on me, and then they called the cops. And so I got arrested, and that was the last time I went to jail.
When was this? What year?
This was 2016, December of 2016.
Wow.
And this time was different. Something happened.
Yeah.
I was done. It was over.
How much time did you get for that?
That time I did 4 months.
Okay.
I went to jail, had to have my mom and my grandparents pack up everything out of the house because, I was basically going to lose all of my dad's stuff that had just died in August. Something happened though. Like when I got there, it wasn't the same. Every time I would go to jail, I knew everybody. Like I was big shit. Oh, Bear's here. Like everybody's either scared or excited, and like this time was different.
Yeah.
And I remember I had a cellie. She was from New York. She was fighting a federal case. She had got caught up. And she wasn't somebody that I would normally cell up with.
Yeah.
Because usually those type of females, I would beat them up and kick them out. But something about her was different. I don't know if it was the changes in me that were happening that I was unaware of. But we ended up getting really close within the first couple months. And I remember one night, and I don't share this with too many people because, but one night, I woke up out of sleep. I was on top bunk, and, in jail, the lights are always on. So the light was shining through our cell door through the window. And I remember looking at the light because something just like woke me up out of my sleep.
Yeah.
Like out of a dead sleep. And I seen the light at the door, and I was like, what the heck? And I remember I'm just thinking, and it was like the light was just getting brighter and brighter and brighter. And I remember thinking like, am I still asleep? Because everything seemed kind of foggy. And then I felt like a sense of like being really, really light. Like if I was light, and I remember all of a sudden it felt like I drifted up into the corner of the room.
Oh, wow.
And I was looking down at myself. And I remember in my mind I was thinking, what the fuck is happening right now? Right? And then
Yeah. Wow.
boom, it was morning, and I sat straight up, and I was like, was that a dream? Or, I was like, what the hell? And I remember it was pod time, and they opened the doors. They're like, pod time. It was really, really early, and I remember I got off the bunk, and I was like, I cannot be here. Like, I was so uncomfortable. I felt like I was going to crawl out of my own skin. Like if I had to look at anybody else, like something happened to me
Yeah.
that like completely changed. Like I was a whole new person that morning.
It's almost like divine intervention, right?
Like a straight outer body spiritual experience.
What do you think it was?
Honestly, like I feel like it was God showing me like, look at yourself, like where you're at.
Yeah.
Like, it's time.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
it's time, right? And I went out to pod time, and mind you, like I've always big bad bear and always had to, meet that standard and that pride and that ego. But I broke that day. I was completely shattered to pieces. I got on the phone, I called my mom and lost it. Like, ugly crying, ballistic, like snot's coming out of my nose. And to the point where all these other females in this pod are looking at me like, she's the toughest one here. Like, what?
What's going on?
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Like, everybody's scared to ask. And I'm like, Mom, like that kind of cry.
Wow. Yeah.
Hysterical.
Mm-hmm.
I can't spend another day in here. Like, I need to come home. And my mom is freaking out. Like, she's never,
Yeah.
this is not normal for us.
Yeah.
Like, we've always tough cookies, right? And I remember, I don't even know. Like, I was hysterical. And I could not spend another freaking day in that place. And I remember the first words out of my mom's mouth was, do you want to go to a program? And I said, yes. I had been asked that before, try to be introduced. I had an aunt in recovery.
That was a subject you would avoid prior, right?
Always.
Yeah.
Knew where it was, knew how to get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, I'm cool. And my mouth just blurted out, yes.
Wow.
Right? And I was like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And my mom's like, all right, I'm going to call your auntie. And I'm like, okay. And I hung up and I had court like in the next couple of days. And within that couple of days, my mom and my aunts all worked together and they got me a bed.
Where was this at?
At Women on the Way.
Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't know what to expect. I was scared. But at the same time, I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do this, right?
Yeah.
It's happening for me. So I went to court. My aunt was there for me, well known in the recovery community. She also had worked in recovery as well. And so my aunt was there. They released me to my aunt. And the process, I didn't even want to go back to my cell. I went straight back to the holding tank and was like, whatever I have in there, my cellie could keep it. Like, I don't want none of it. Yeah. And so once I was in that holding tank, it took forever. It took like 12 hours. So they let me out in the middle of the night. Of course, my aunt wasn't there. I had my homie come pick me up, and I got loaded one last time. I remember we were outside in the shopping center, right outside of Santa Rita, in the Hacienda area. I was getting high in the car, in the parking lot. And ended up going back to his house. Was checking on my social media, trying to reconnect with a friend and whatever. And I was like, I'll be there in the morning, right? Like, I'll go to my mom's in the morning. And I remember I was on Facebook, and my sister seen me on Facebook. And she was like, Shell, where are you? Like, mom's there. Everybody's looking for you. Like, you're supposed to, you know, be going to. And I was like, oh, I'll be there in the morning, right? Like I will, I promise. And so I was waiting to see one of my friends. Well, he never showed up. So first thing, like 7 o'clock in the morning, I told my homie, I'm like, you need to drop me off at my mom's. Like, I got to go to this program. And so he took me to my mom's, and my mom was already 7 in the morning on the porch smoking a cigarette, stressed out on the phone. And I'll never forget, we pulled up and I rolled down the window and I looked at her, and the look on her face, she's like, she's here. Like, it was the most joyful facial expression I've ever seen my mom have. And by then my mom ended up quitting doing drugs. My mom has like 10 years clean.
Nice.
And so at this point, I'm like, okay, I gotta go do this, right? So I'm at my mom's, we go, and she drops me off, and I'm in this house full of women, not knowing what to expect. I've never not used drugs before or been around people who didn't use drugs or,
Yeah.
and
Are these all recovering women also? Okay.
yeah. And so it's a
Hmm.
sober living environment. And so I remember getting there, and the woman who ran the home was like, "What's your last name?" And I told her, and she was like, "Girl, we're family. I grew up with your mom." And I was like, oh, "Okay, cool." So
Yeah.
that like opened the door for me, made me feel a little bit better. And from there, I didn't know what to expect, right? And like all the years of like masking and using and the violence was hiding that scared little girl I had always been, right?
Yeah.
And that first day there, it was her all over again. And I'm like in my mind contemplating like, are you going to stay or are you going to run again? Right.
Hmm.
And I remember like, just wait it out. Cause I know whatever happened to me and losing my dad and all that stuff, something changed. I knew it. I can feel it.
Yeah.
And so, I was there for a little while, and then I see one of my homegirls that I knew her brother really well, but I knew her really good too. And the first thing I thought was like, oh, we're going to get high. Honestly, like that was the first thing I thought. And seeing her and engaging with her, and I'm like, oh, she's really on this hype. Like, okay, like she's really here. Like she's trying to change her life. I'm like, okay, let me like start peeping everybody out, right? So that first night, I was like, I didn't have a phone. I came with nothing, a bag of hygiene my mom had bought me, and that was it. And my mom was like, I'll take you to buy you a phone tomorrow. So there I was, like trying to make all these excuses, right? But once I seen my friend there, and I know like her lifestyle, and I was like, okay, like if she can do it, let
Gives
me
you that
just,
hope
yeah,
you
let me
needed.
like
Yeah.
see what's going on here. And so my first night there, let me tell you, I slept like a baby, right? And this is a faith-based program, right?
Yeah.
So, mind you, I woke up the next morning, first time ever being sober in about 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
Woke up and was like, where am I? And I hear this beautiful singing, right? It sounds like angels. And I'm like, what is that? I get off the top bunk and I come walking down the stairs and they're having praise and worship.
Nice.
And it's all the women from all the cottages and the big house. They all meet in the living room every morning. And they're having praise and worship and they're singing their hearts out to God and Jesus. And I'm like, wow. It sounded like, and couldn't none of them hold a note, but it sounded to me in my ears, it sounded like the most beautiful thing I ever heard.
Yeah.
And I was like smiling from ear to ear. And I was like, what? And they just all welcomed me with open arms and just embraced me. And it was the best feeling that I had had in so long. It was like just love and kindness and warmth. And I was like, at that moment, I can do this. Like it just filled my heart. Like that was where I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so from there, it was just like every day I just prayed and thanked God. And I got into the church and got involved. And, for a long time, I was like ashamed. And there was so much shame and guilt around the lives that I had destroyed and like the people I had hurt and like, the amends that I needed to make to my family. And like, so that first couple months was like really, really tough, like really, really spiritual for me.
Yeah.
And then it kicked in, like, once I started having a relationship with God and, like, getting into the church, like, it was revealed to me what had happened to me in that cell that night. Like, God was showing me. Like, I know for a fact, like, that's what he was showing me. Like,
Oh, for
this,
sure.
like, you're like a butterfly coming out of the cocoon, you know?
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it felt like. And so from there,
What year was that? I'm sorry.
this was 2017.
Okay.
So I got out in March of 2017. And my first night there was March 4th, 2017. So that's my clean date.
Nice.
I just celebrated 7 years.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's been nothing but, I mean, my life is amazing. Like, the work that I do, I was still fighting my case. I wasn't sentenced yet. It was going to be based on the satisfactory of me completing the program. And so I was still going through that. And once I got sentenced, I still had probation for a little bit. And so I was working. I got a job. I was working here and there. And going to church, and I started doing outpatient services at Second Chance. And that is when I think that it really clicked for me that this is doable.
Yeah.
Like, the hope and the possibility of me actually being a better person and staying a better person happened for me when I went there. I started doing outpatient classes, and I ran into a friend of mine, and he didn't remember me at first. And I was kind of like, man, but he was a counselor there.
Okay.
And the first thing I thought, like, we used to run the streets together. And the first thing in my mind was like, if he can do it, I'm definitely able to do it. Like, for sure. Right. Yeah. And so, that really, like, sprung me into action, like, made me feel like I'm doing this for real. Like, and then once I was like, do you remember me? When I had already been going there for quite a while, seeing my counselor and stuff. And then when he remembered, oh my God, Bear. He was like, I'm so happy you're here. I was like, no, you don't understand how happy I am to see you. And at that point, he had had 5 years clean when I was fresh in the rooms. And so I remember thinking he was my motivation, because I was like, oh, I can't wait to be like, oh, I got 5 years clean, right?
Yeah, familiar face always helps, right?
It was great. It was like the best thing that could have happened to me at that point.
Yeah.
And so I continued on there. I ended up, just working on myself, getting involved in the 12-step programs, going to meetings, getting involved, just completely switching everything up, and, just making sure that I changed people, places, things. Like, ended up taking a really good suggestion and going to school. I went to Merritt College. Mind you, I hadn't been in school in years, right? And so I ended up going back to school, went to college, graduated in 2021, got my degree, got an associate's in community social services and substance abuse, got certification. I ended up, that time that I was still on probation, I was just working like these little jobs here and there just to make some money to get on my feet. And I ended up losing my job. And so they were just like laying folks off. It was like this warehouse job.
Yeah.
And I remember I was going to see my probation officer, and I was telling our house mom, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she was like, Mija, ask your probation officer. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And so my probation officer referred me to this nonprofit organization called La Familia. They're well known in Hayward.
Yeah.
And I got referred. They had just started a reentry department. And so they were working with probation, Alameda County, to for reentry employment program.
Okay.
And so I ended up going there, doing really well. I was like their first graduating class, and they really loved me, and so they brought me on.
Nice.
And I just fell in love with the work. Like it was another like God shot for me. Like this is how I'm supposed to help people. Like I played with the working in the substance use field for a little while, but I like felt like I have to live my own recovery every day. Like I don't know how I can deal with
Yeah.
other people's. Like I know I'm supposed to help people, but maybe just not mainly focused on that. And then once I got this job, it was like confirmed, like completely confirmed. And so I did really well there. I came on as a peer mentor, and I worked as a peer mentor for about 4 months, and then they were opening a new program. And so they were partnering with the district attorney's office. And so it was like this first time ever partnership. And it was this really great program for folks that were like facing low level felonies, like to get their lives together, be partnered with a coach, a life coach, and
Yeah.
and to help them get back on track. And so this was all new to me too, but I went for it. And so I ended up becoming the intake and resource specialist,
Nice.
which was a beautiful experience.
Yeah.
So here's why I always keep mentioning God has always had his hand on my life, because all those years I spent in jail, and I ended up, our intakes were folks that were in custody.
Uh-huh.
So I had to work at the courthouse. So I got to engage and work with all of the deputies, all of the public defenders, all of the judges that had known me throughout my entire life.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was such a moment of recognition that I had. There was a specific deputy who known me from my first time in jail all the way through my last time in jail. And I'll never forget, I was sitting in the courtroom and I was waiting for my client's name to be called. And she seen me, and she came walking clear across the courtroom, and I was like, oh God, she's coming. And I was like, and she walks up to me and she's like, don't I know you? And I go, yeah. I go, you remember me? She's like, of course I remember you. And I was like, she was like, what are you doing? And I explained to her like everything. She was like, oh my goodness. She was like, what a pleasure to see you doing great things for your community.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And just that, I was like, this is what I'm meant to do. Like for her to do that, like I even got to go into that last case, that judge that sentenced me when I went to Women on the Way. I got to go in his chambers and talk over a couple of my clients with them. And like, that was so different for me.
Do you
right?
remember
Like,
that deputy's name?
I do. Her
What
name
is
is
it?
Deputy Kamak.
Kamak.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Alameda County.
I'm sure she would love to hear that.
She's great too.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, she is. I didn't know if I could say their name.
You're fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
That's a good story. I'm sure she
No,
would love to
she's
be a part
awesome.
of that.
And just her doing that made me just, want to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm like, man, if they recognize it too, then like, this is it.
Yeah.
And so in March just made 6 years that I've been with my agency. I've worked my way up. I'm assistant director of diversion and reentry now.
Jesus. Wow.
And so
What a change, huh?
I've got to help so many people, like change the trajectory of their lives. Like, it's so funny because I'll tell people now, like I have staff that were like, Rachell, you been to jail?
Yeah.
And I was like, for real? And they're like, I would have never thought. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. I was like, the look is gone.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
it's like, oh, it's so, it
Good
makes,
feeling though, right?
man, so good. And it's like, now where I'm at now, is exactly where I need to be. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I've got to help change so many people's lives. I still get to do that every day.
Yeah.
I got to graduate college. I'm currently at Cal State East Bay pursuing
Nice.
my sociology, bachelor's degree. And so that's like a whole nother mission too of itself now. But
But you're bettering yourself now.
so
Now you're
much
working on
better.
you, right? That's awesome.
That's all
That's
I can
great.
do. Like every day is it's just, a new day, and like even this experience right now, like I'm so grateful to be here, like just to be able to tell my story, because this is the way that only people are going to be able to relate and connect and be like I said, it takes to see that one person to be like, "Oh, if they can do it, I can do it,"
Yeah. 100%.
because that's like the most important piece. So right now things are well for me. I'm at a really good point in my life. I feel like every day there's a purpose.
Yeah.
I'm in therapy. Like something I never would have thought I would have done, and it took
Yeah.
me a long time. But that piece also helps me, help other people, acknowledge like, hey, if I can't pour into myself, I can't pour into you,
Yeah.
right? And
Absolutely.
so right now I oversee multiple programs, and one of them is for folks who are suffering from homelessness, mental illness, or substance use disorder. And we get them connected and engaged into services. And so, like, still being able to see folks at that bottom level, like, always reminds me to never forget where I come from, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, the humility of being humble and staying grateful for everything that I've come out of, like it's nothing but God. Like it's all by God's grace, because I wouldn't be here right now. Like honestly, like if it wasn't for everything that I've been through, all finally makes sense and adds up to exactly where I'm at today and what I need to be doing and who the person and the woman that I'm supposed to be.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is amazing, man. The whole entire story, just thinking about the fact that, like you mentioned, you were terrorizing lives prior, right? I mean, this is something that you were doing on an everyday basis, right? Just
Yeah.
putting people in fear, they couldn't trust you around them, and to now people not even believing that you had ever been to jail. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I mean, it's a complete turnaround. So this is the kind of stories that we want to talk to people and have them explain, because I think people hearing this story, they're going to say, well, shit, if she did all of those things, I didn't do any of those things, or some of those things, you know what I mean? I only did just the addiction part of it. And it's hard for me to see myself 10 years from now in a different place, right?
Yeah.
And they see your story and go, wow, if she can do it, just like you saw your friend and said, if he could do it, for sure I could do it. So that I want people to see that. So I really appreciate you coming out here and telling your story and talking to us. It's, I know it'll reach the right people, and I'm excited for it to do that. So, yeah, keep killing it. You're doing amazing. Yeah, and I'm
you.
proud of you. And I don't know you very well, but I'm proud of you. And
Thank
just
you.
like that,
That
the
means a lot.
deputy, I'm sure at some point, hopefully sees this and can say, hey, I didn't realize that I had an impact. Because
Yeah.
those little things. This is me as law enforcement. That's what I look for, right? I look for that person to say, officer so-and-so saw me and he did this for me, or he said this to me and it changed how I thought. That's literally what I do my job for,
Yeah.
right? That's the good part of my job. So again, thank you. I
Thank
really
you for
appreciate you
having me.
coming out.